Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. Hi, everybody. My name's Corbin Scholz. I am the farm director at Seed Savers Exchange, and I'm thrilled to be here with you tonight to talk about food systems and seeds within that system. I am going to start by giving a little bit of information about the seed system that we're in. And then I'll go through some biological information about seeds and then jump into how to actually save seeds in your garden. Um, and I will take a couple breaks throughout to make sure that questions are getting answered, and then we'll have plenty of time at the end as well. All right. So, Seed Savers Exchange is a nonprofit located in Decorah, Iowa, which is the northeast part of the state. We have the largest non-governmental seed bank in the country with over 27,000 varieties of vegetables, herbs, and flowers. Our collection is full of these crops that were donated by gardeners we just celebrated our 50th year last in 2025. So over the last 50 years, collecting and maintaining stories with these seeds has been our mission, and through that to preserve the ecological and biological diversity in our country. We have all heirloom open pollinated seeds, and we have all of the stories and cultures that come with them. So on the farm at Seed Savers Exchange, we have 890 acres. Not all of that is in seed production. We have about 8 acres in seed production. And then we have the rest is we have a pretty beautiful landscape, lots of bluffs and trees and hills and creeks, and we maintain a lot of conservation practices to make sure that our land is sequestering carbon, and we have a trout stream that has some native endangered trout in it that we're taking care of, and we have a herd of British White Park cattle that we're also maintaining the genetics of on our land. So we do quite a lot. Um, and you've probably heard about Seed Savers Exchange through our catalog sales. So we always say that we're not a seed company, we're a nonprofit that does preservation work, and our catalog sales help support the mission of the organization. So yeah, and this picture on the lower right-hand side of the screen, that is one of our gardens. We have 2 gardens located by our visitor center where we do evaluations, trials, and lot checks. And the lot check just means that we're making sure that the crop we grew last year didn't get cross-pollinated. So we're growing a little tiny lot of it out to make sure that it is true to type and doesn't have any genetic variation. Um, okay, so seeds are truly the foundation of our food system. We cannot grow anything or eat anything without the existence of a seed. So the food system is shaped by seeds, what food exists, who controls it, and how resilient our food system can be. So for us, and our mission at Seed Savers Exchange is to make sure that there is plenty of diversity, because diversity really does mean resilience. And in many ways that we're going to be talking about, it also brings a lot of cultural heritage. So, indigenous folks have been stewarding seeds for hundreds of years, and enslaved African folks have brought over seeds braided in their hair and are continuing to steward those same varieties. Today. There's a lot of economic power around seeds, especially in the Midwest, where we are monocrop capital of the country. And so we see a lot of this in who controls seeds, and that influences farmers' choices and livelihoods. And then there's also the ecological impact. So seed traits determine soil health, input use, and ecosystem relationships. This graph is really, there's five pieces of the pie that I'm going to dig into a little bit today. These are just the five basic functions of the seed system. So talking about, you can really start at any point of the pie, but I'm going to start at variety development. It's basically the adaptive and directional force of a seed system. It determines resilience, diversity, farmer autonomy, ecological impact, and also the long-term trajectory of the food system. Seed supply. So it grows or fails based on how seeds are produced, tested, and distributed. So there are two parts of this. There's in situ and ex situ, and they describe where and how the seed is conserved, adapted, and maintained. So in situ means on farm or in place. So the seeds remain embedded in living farm systems and continue to evolve. So a lot of farmers, if farmers are growing seed for themselves or for a seed company, doing contract growing for a seed company, all of that is in situ. So it is ongoing adaptation to local soils, climates, pests, and culture. And the knowledge is continued to be carried through practice and community. Some of the limitations around this, these seeds then are only as strong and reliable as farmers are. And as we're seeing it's very hard to exist as a small farmer in this country. Due to land loss, displacement, and market pressure. And so if we can't have small farmers continuing to farm, then we can't have all the diversity in the seeds that they're producing. And then also it's less formal documentation and less long-term backup. All right, then XC2 is off-farm and stored seeds. So these are two pictures. On the right-hand side, the top picture is sometimes what the seeds look like when they're sent in the mail to Seed Savers Exchange. And then the lower picture is in one of our seed vaults at Seed Savers Exchange, and that's our preservation team. But anyway, it removes seeds from production and stores them long term. So they're stored under very controlled conditions. They're managed by institutions or organizations. And the emphasis on there's an emphasis on preservation and backup. So that we're always, freezing in time that genetic diversity or those genetics of that crop type, and just making sure that we have it in storage just in case something happens. So some of the limitations of that is that there's not really any ongoing adaptation to changing climates, which we are seeing more and more these days. So since we have so many seeds in our seed bank, so many varieties, and my farm team only has 8 people on it. So this year we're growing out 750 varieties, but when you divide that by 27,000, like that's just a small bit of seeds that are getting regenerated to put back into storage. And so, we might even not revisit these varieties for another 50 years to regenerate them. And so it's adapting to climate, to different climates and conditions, but with massive, with decades between. And it can also disconnect seeds from farmers and communities. And then there's risk of centralization and restricted access, which at Seed Savers Exchange, we're very, very aware of and trying to make sure that our seeds are becoming more and more accessible. And for us, the goal of preservation is to make sure that these seeds are no longer rare. So for a healthy seed system, we need both of these. Without the in situ, the seeds become frozen in time, and without ex situ, diversity can be lost forever. And when we're talking about just seed systems, which I think is really, really important to comment on, is that in situ systems must be protected and resourced. So like I was saying with farmers, we need farmers to keep farming. And my personal story is that I had a very large vegetable farm. We had 150 CSA members. I had 12 employees. We ran the largest food hub in the state. We were the first farm to grow, process, and distribute vegetables to local schools. And when when the farm started, I was burnt out working 100 hours a week. I lived under the poverty line. I didn't have access to health insurance. And my story is not unique at all. It's happening all over the country in every state to farmers who just cannot make it doing this such demanding physically this work. And also I'm a single person with no children, and so just imagining mothers and small families trying to do this work and maintain a healthy lifestyle is really hard, and that must be protected and resourced. In ex situ systems, we must be held accountable. We must keep the seeds accessible, and we must be reciprocal with seeds, with knowledge. And then also, farmers and indigenous peoples must be recognized as rights holders and not just sources. All right, then we move to seed dissemination, which is the combination of information sharing and physical distribution that connects seed producers with farmers, gardeners, and communities. So information it could be what I'm doing right now, talking about seed systems and growing seeds and sharing knowledge. And also that is can, different ways of not different means of knowledge can be shared. So growing practices, stories behind the seeds, the cultures behind the seeds, how, what is the regional adaptivity of the seeds that we're talking about. And then seed distribution can be distribution from seed banks, cooperatives, seed companies, farmer to farmer sharing, and then also like as large as global supply chains. And then this seed dissemination shapes the adoption of resilient and diverse crops. It determines the equity of access, and it influences genetic diversity on farms. Then we are looking at crop production use. And it's basically where seeds go from being a seed to food, fiber, and future seeds. So it's where the seed is like actually physically grown out. And it's the point where seeds fulfill their economic and food system purpose. All right. And then of course there's legal frameworks around everything that needs to be commoditized. And so it governs intellectual property. So license agreements, whether farmers can save, replant, or sell seed, certification to recognize a new crop variety so it can be marketed and sold, quality and labeling standards where, germination rates, purity, and phytosanitary rules need to be pretty transparent and follow strict guidelines. And then also it governs seed exchange and distribution. So sharing those seeds. All right, this is probably a good time to stop and take any questions that have come up.
Hello again. I was wondering, in terms of the loss of small farms and the seeds that they've been using and adapting to their thing, is there any kind of estimate of what that loss is in terms of varieties of seed or of acreage of seeds lost? Is
Yeah,
there?
I don't have a specific statistic around that. I'm sure it changes year by year. What I can say though is that because we're seeing more and more small farms dissolve, especially in the Midwest, I learned to farm in the Pacific Northwest on Whidbey Island in Washington, and so the Pacific Northwest holds a really special place in my heart. But the food system is completely different in the Midwest, and it's harder and harder for farmers to hold on to their farm and their land because of all of the pressures that are happening outside. But what I've been seeing is that seed companies, sorry about that, seed companies, anywhere from, really small regionally adapted seed companies to, Seed Savers Exchange, which serves, distributes seed all over the country. We are recognizing the loss of those farms, and we are doing our best to back up, to not only send, varieties that need to be grown out to one farm, but maybe to two or three farms. And also we're getting a little bit smarter about how we're doing it. So we are having contract growers. We have, oh, I should say that my farm team focuses mostly on regenerating the 27,000 varieties that we have in our seed bank. And we support small farmers all over the country by giving them contracts to grow seed for our catalog. So we're supporting small farmers all over the country. And but what we ask them to do is grow out 3 years worth of the seed. And so the 3 years then we put in the cooler. And once we get down to having 2 years left, we have it grown out again by a different farmer. And so then the seeds are getting adapted to different areas. And also we have, at least 3 years of backup. And if we need to, I can say, all right, we don't have a farmer to grow that one. We're going to grow it on our farm at Seed Savers Exchange. I know that a lot of the reasons that we have so many seed varieties in our seed bank right now is because gardening feels like it's becoming a lost hobby or skill. And so what's happening is, a grandparent might pass away, and the grandchild is like, well, I found these seeds when we were cleaning out the house, and this is grandma's best pink tomato. Like, we can't lose this. And so they'll send as much information as they can to us with the seed, and we will do our best to make sure that this seed stays viable and alive for the future, because all of these adapted seeds all over are so important for the diversity in our ecological and biological diversity, for our health, for our soil health, for our pollinators' health, for everything.
Great, great. And this is just a point of order. Can you explain the word phytosanitary? One of our
Absolutely.
people is not familiar with that term.
Yes, of course. So it basically means that seeds can carry disease. And so, for example, if we get a seed donated to us, if it's a bean and it has some sort of disease on it, and then we plant it in our soil, and then all of a sudden we've got that disease in our soil and we can't get rid of it. And so it's basically just like the transfer of seed and making sure that it's staying clean and healthy, so that we're not moving all of this these diseases or anything like that around to everybody. So that's just it's something in the legal framework that is it's a measure of standard quality standards.
Great. Yeah, it's not certainly not a term that most people are familiar with. So, okay,
Absolutely.
that's it for now. We'll let
Okay,
you get back to Seed Saving 101.
great. Thank you. All right. So this is just quick. This is a picture of some of the seeds that we have in our collection. We have such a diverse amount. Beans and tomatoes are our two top varieties or crop types that we have in our collection. Lots of people love beans and tomatoes, and they're also some of the easiest to save seed from. Oh, okay. So when we talk about saving seeds, we really need to understand the biology of the seed and the life cycles of the plants. So we have three different plant life cycles. We have annuals, which you're probably familiar with. They grow and produce seed in 1 year. So one season, a lettuce will go from seed to seed. A biennial is a crop that needs a vernalization or a winter, a time of cold and dormancy in order to produce seed the second year. And then a perennial crop is a crop that comes back every year and produces seed every year. And so those are really important distinctions. So in Iowa, we don't have a climate in order to overwinter cabbage or collard greens or kale or carrots because the ground freezes solid and there's not enough protection for those crops. So what we do here, and I know in the Pacific Northwest you can overwinter those things, and we have a lot of contract farmers growers that grow the biennials for seed for us. But what we do for regenerating our collection for biennials is that we plant the plant in the summer. By the fall, we dig it up and we put it into a pot. We transplant it into a pot that we store in our root cellar. So normal root cellars, you'd probably think, oh, I've got potatoes and squash and onions in there. But for us, we've got a lot of plants in pots where they're dormant. And then in the spring, in mid to late April, we will plant those plants back out into the ground and then they'll produce seed that second year. So it is a lot more work for us, but we got to do it to fulfill our mission. All right, so we have some different flowers and plant parts, and you will probably know this already. It's just like humans. So the male parts produce and release pollen, and the female parts receive pollen and grow seeds. So some flowers called perfect flowers contain both male and female parts within the same flower. So tomatoes, peppers, beans, eggplant, peas. Imperfect flowers contain only male or female parts and not both. So an example of this is squash. In this photo, you can see the female flower has a little tiny squash embryo there, and then a male flower has just a thin, normal kind of plant stalk. And if you've ever eaten squash blossoms, they're usually taken from the male flower is taken so that it doesn't mess with the ability to also have fruit on that plant. Some other plants with imperfect flowers are cucumbers, corn, pumpkins, and watermelons. All right, then we have monoecious versus dioecious. So male monoecious, there are male and female flowers on one plant or in one flower. So those plants can self-pollinate. Then there's the dioecious, which is there's a male only plant and a female only plant. So it requires both plants to reproduce. One thing we see often at Seed Savers Exchange is asparagus and spinach. Hemp is another one I threw on there because it's becoming a more and more popular crop, but you do need both male and female plant in order for there to be viable seed production. All right, so then we have some pollination types. There's self-pollination and cross-pollination. So monoecious can do both, and dioecious can only, they need the cross-pollination. And cross-pollination can happen through wind, through insects or animals, and also by hand pollination. We have to hand pollinate all of the corn varieties that we grow on our farm here because we live in a crazy corn state. So we make sure we do that to keep the genetic purity of the variety. Okay, and then there are true to type crops, which means they're an open pollinated variety. So the seeds will reliably produce the same kind of plant if saved and replanted, as long as they're not cross-pollinated. So, and then a hybrid is a cross between two different plant parents. So you cannot save seed from a hybrid and create an identical offspring. You must purchase new seeds each year. However, a lot of the times, small farmers will choose to grow hybrids because they are, if the seed is not regionally adapted, sometimes hybrids have that strength to kind of deal with all of the vulnerabilities that happen in a growing season. All right, so why did all of that matter? Because it helps us with crop planning. So when I have 750 crops that I have to plan, I have to keep in mind these three things basically. Isolation distance, pollination methods, and population size. So we'll dig into that. Isolation distance is the minimum physical separation between two or more varieties of the same plant species to maintain the genetic purity. A lot of this time, or a lot of this um, distance is if you were on a flat plain and you had one tomato plant here and one tomato plant here with nothing between. So a lot of isolation distances deal with a range. So sometimes, for tomatoes, for example, it'll say 50 feet to 500 feet. And it's like, okay, 50 feet or 500 feet would be if there are no barriers at all. It's a very flat plain and there's two different varieties of tomatoes that you don't want to cross pollinate. However, maybe 50 feet is if you have a tomato, a bean, a melon, a pepper, an eggplant, and then another tomato because you won't have, they're primarily self-pollinating and there's a lot less risk of insect crossing if there's a lot more barriers. The barriers can also be buildings and forest and prairie and elevation change. Some of the other barriers are, insect netting. So this photo here you can see in the very background, there's isolation cages, which we grow seed crops in sometimes if the lots are small enough, and we will introduce mason bees or blue bottle flies, and sometimes both of them together, because they pollinate at different times of the day, and bees, focus on pollinating and flies are kind of just doing their thing, but do a good job. And so it just adds more reliability. And then there's temporal isolation, which is, like for example, lettuce or beans, their life is a pretty short life cycle. So sometimes you can plant beans in successions so that they're not flowering at the same time, and that would be able to make your isolation distance smaller. Population size is something that you wouldn't necessarily think about, but we have to think about a lot at Seed Savers Exchange because it's basically a population size that allows the plant to adapt to conditions and resist pests and disease, which ensures food security. So we don't take seed from, okay, here's an example, eggplant. You need 50 plants of an eggplant in order to have a population size to get the genetic diversity that is required, which means we collect a little bit of seeds off of each plant. Um, and each crop type, there are different numbers. And you can find this information in the Seed Garden, which is a book that we have for sale on the Seed Savers Exchange website. This is my favorite seed saving book. It has every, crop type, how to grow and save and process, store the seeds. And it also has really good information on, like the flower type, the primary pollination method, the population size. So there's two population sizes in this chart. There's for viable seeds. So really, like for okra, you only need one plant to get viable seed. But if you're talking about variety maintenance or genetic preservation, you have to have, seeds from a bunch of different plants in order to get in that whole season's worth of kind of genetic diversity. And then it says the recommended isolation distance for seed saving. So this chart is in the Seed Garden book, which I think there might be a link to in the chat. Okay, and then seed selection. This is really important and pretty much the reason why gardeners choose to save seeds because it it lets you choose characteristics that you want to see that are you know, maybe you have, did I put that in the slide or is it later? Let's see. Um, yeah, I think I talk about it later, but basically selecting, for example, if you want to start stewarding a tomato variety and you want it to have less seeds in it, you would start to collect seeds from the tomatoes that already have less seeds in them, and you would plant those year after year after year, and eventually you've got a tomato that's got very few seeds in it. Um, Another thing is you're only choosing like the biggest, largest tomatoes. And over time, saving the seeds only from those very, very large tomatoes, you are going to increase the size of your fruit. Okay, I'm going to stop there and get another couple questions.
Okay. Um, as urban gardeners, how can we maintain a bean variety or a pea variety, whatever we have, in our small urban gardens or even in our community gardens where we don't have a lot of choice into isolation.
Yeah, so that I would say is one of the hardest things for gardeners is finding crops that have that isolation, the required isolation distance. So tomatoes, peas, and beans, all of their isolation distances are very short. And so like for beans and peas, it could be 20 feet. So maybe you have one variety of bean in the back of your yard and another variety of bean in the front of your yard. There's also, they make insect netting. So it's called Protect Net, PROTEKNET. And that helps with cross pollination due to insects. A lot of the time, it's hard to control wind pollination through any sort of netting. But yeah, so another thing I would recommend is if you're really into a certain variety of tomato, maybe only grow that tomato and year after year after year get really, really good at that one tomato. And maybe your friend saves a different kind of tomato and then you can share the seeds, share the fruit. But yeah, so um, stewarding seeds is a little bit harder in a garden setting because of that spacing issue, but you could also save, one bean variety, one pepper variety, one tomato variety, one this variety in one, for one season. And if you're not really that interested in developing that variety over time, you could grow a different type of tomato the next year and save it for seed. And then over time you have this stock of like 5 different tomato varieties and 5 different pepper varieties. And also sharing those with your community. But yeah, there are some seeds that don't need a lot of isolation space. Um, but I do know what you mean about the isolation distance because in one of our production plots at Seed Savers, there is a gravel road and then another house that has a large garden on the other side of the road. And every year, call them up, hey, what's going to be in your garden this year? And then I have to kind of see what's going on across the street because then that changes my crop plan and the locations that I can plant things in.
Great. Well, thank you, and I will let you get back to it.
Great. Okay. Sorry that wasn't a super great answer. But I'm gonna keep going and maybe we'll think of better ways for gardeners. Okay, so when you're processing seed, there's 2 different categories to keep in mind. There's dry seed processing and wet seed processing. So dry seed processing deals with seeds that naturally dry on the plant before harvesting. So some of these are beans, peas, lettuce, corn, sunflowers, okra, broccoli, but all brassicas. So broccoli, cabbage, kale, cauliflower, onions, herbs, and flowers. So, the first part of dry seed processing is to allow the plant to dry as completely as you can in the field. Um, and then you'll cut the plant and you'll put it somewhere to dry. When the seed is drying and the pod is drying, they tend to become really, really fragile. So you want to make sure you put a tarp under it to catch any seeds that might fall out onto the ground. Um, but we on the farm, we love dry seed processing more because if we're really, really busy and our collard green seeds need to be harvested, we just cut all the plants and then put them on a tarp in the greenhouse. You could also put them on a tarp in your garage, or if you're located somewhere where it doesn't rain too much in the summer, then you can just cut and lay them on a tarp as long as they're not getting wet. Um, the second part of dry seed processing is called threshing. So it basically separates the seeds from the plant. So here are three kind of from bare bones all the way up to, industrial combine scale. But there's for example, dry seeds actually are very, very strong once they're fully dry. And so you can stomp on them, drive over them with a car. We smash we have this metal garbage can and we hold like collard green plants upside down and we just like shake it all, like smash them against the side of the trash can in order to separate the seeds from the chaff. Um, However, it only really breaks away the seeds from the chaff. It doesn't really remove the small pieces of chaff that also might break off with it. So that's where winnowing or fanning comes into play, which removes chaff and dead seed from your good viable seed. So the way that we do this is that we have fans. This, like, I always think this looks like a joke, but it works so well. So you would put your fan on low and you would dump out the chaff and the seeds in front of the fan. And the heavier seeds are the viable seeds. So the heavier seeds will fall into the bucket right under, where you're dumping, and all of the chaff and the dead seeds, which are lighter, blow off. And you would just repeat this process, multiple times until you have a really good bin of the heavier seeds. Here is my bean saving process. So I guess that first picture looks like peas to me. But anyway, it's the same process for peas. So you would let the beans or peas mature on the plant. So get really big and dry. You want them to dry on the plant. At a gardening scale, it's really easy to just break these open by stomping on them with your feet or just breaking the pods open with your hands if you're watching a good movie, or you can invite all your friends over to help you break pods open. And then continue the drying on screens with a fan on them so that they can be, fully dry by the time that you're putting them into storage. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. Okay, are there any questions on dry seed processing?
I, there is a comment. The comment is that our listener had no idea seed saving was this comprehensive. Was it really this involved 200 years ago?
I'm sure they had different methods of doing things. I like to say that a lot of small farmers are really scrappy and a lot of gardeners are really scrappy. And so I'm like, stomp on those seeds. Or when I talk about tomato seed processing, you'll see, I think I put a picture in the slideshow of us like just stomping on tomatoes in buckets. And so there's and I always say if there's 100 different farms, there's 100 different ways to farm, and same with gardening as well. And that's the same with seed saving, is like there's so many different ways to do all of the things. And this is just the way that we do it. Um, all right. Can I go on to wet seed processing?
Go right
All
on.
right, thank you. Okay, so wet seed processing is saving seeds from a fleshy fruit. So sometimes it requires fermentation, which, um, as you know, sometimes there's like a gelatinous coating around a seed. So tomatoes, cucumbers, um, sunberries or huckleberries. And so we want to be able to remove that coating. Um, and wash the seeds enough that they're clean so we can dry them and store them properly. So some examples of this are tomatoes, cucumbers, melons, and squash. Oops. Okay, here we go. Yes, here's the picture. So wet seed processing, you start by the wet seed processing is a lot more nuanced than dry seed processing, where some crops you harvest at market maturity, and like tomatoes, and some crops you harvest when they are way, way, way past maturity. So that would be an eggplant or a cucumber. Peppers you would harvest when they are the mature color. So for example, if you want to save jalapeno seeds, you would need to wait for that jalapeno to turn red, and then you would be able to harvest the seeds out of them. And in the seed garden book, it will run through all of that for you. It really is a by crop type 101 how to do this in your garden. So for harvesting wet seed, you will cut open the fruit, and on a gardening scale, you can just squeeze the seeds out with your hands. On our scale, this is a picture of the farm in 2025, and we're stomping on the tomatoes in a Rubbermaid. So after you stomp on them, you let them soak or ferment for tomatoes, it's 2 days, or until there's a moldy coating on the top layer. Um, so okay, I know that in a couple next slide or a couple slides, there's in depth about tomatoes, but I'm gonna keep going on for now. So some seeds that do not have that gelatinous coat on them, you'll just separate the seeds by your hands from the pulp, and you can also use a heavy sprayer on a screen to be able to spray that kind of pulpy, stringy uh, uh, flesh off of the seeds. Um, for wet seed processing, you always want to make sure that they dry immediately after washing so that they don't start to germinate. So what we do is we spread seeds out on screens with fans blowing on them, and we make sure that the screens are lifted up off of the table a little bit. So we have over the years gathered just old window screens from people's houses when they're replacing their screens, and we use those still. We prop them up on little blocks, and once your squash seed is clean, we'll lay them out, you spread them out, we'll put them up on blocks, and then we'll put fans on them to dry as quickly as we can. um, Yes. So once they're dried, the seed can be screened, which I think I show in a couple slides. Okay, so here's my saving tomato seeds. So step one, smash. And for us, it's okay that we leave the skins on them. It takes just a tiny bit longer to get to where we want it, but it's okay because we have such a large amount of tomatoes that we're saving seed from that um, we're okay with that. So you don't add any water. All of the liquid actually is coming from the tomato itself. So you're gonna smash it or cut and squeeze the pulp out into a container. You're gonna wait for about 2 days until there's a layer of mold on the top. The good seeds, the heavy good seeds will sink to the bottom, and all of the plant matter and dead seeds will stay on the top layer. And what I like to do, an extra little tip, is that when you come back to this ferment happening, before you decide, okay, this is it, stir it up a little bit because some good viable seeds will be stuck in the upper um, kind of fleshy layer, and so I stir it up and then I let it sit again for 10 minutes until it separates again. And then all you do is you would pour out the top layer, and then all the good seeds on the bottom you would pour into a strainer. And then you would dry, and then you'd put those seeds onto a screen with a fan and dry those out. Um, so seed quality and getting into storage. So I talked about screen size and like you saw maybe air column. So once the seeds dry or are dry, you can use screens to actually sort seeds. So sometimes if you're growing in your garden, it gets a little weedy, which happens to all of us. A lot of the time, sometimes when you're harvesting, plants, maybe some weed seeds will get in with your plant seeds. And so the screen size you can, sort to have the screen size match up or the screen size be a little bit smaller than your seed so that the weed seeds fall through as you're shaking it and the good seeds stay on top. It just selects for the highest quality seed. And then here's a picture of us. I think that's pepper seed. And that is at Seed Savers Exchange. We are drying it with a fan, lifted up off of the counter so the airflow can get through. And then each day we kind of like mix up the seeds. They'll get like a little bit stuck to each other, so we'll kind of like go through and mix them up. Drying is really, really important pretty immediately after cleaning to prevent mold or germination. You want to do this out of direct sunlight, anything cooler than 95 degrees Fahrenheit. So it could be again, in a garage, in a basement, on your porch, anything like that, as long as you've got a fan on it. And also mice like to mess with this and birds, so just be careful for that. Okay, so common ways of drying, window screens, coffee filters, sheet pans, plywood, paper bags or pillowcases for dry processed seed. What you don't want to use are paper towels, cloth, newspaper, or cardboard because the seeds will stick to these surfaces and could be damaged upon, scraping them off or removing them from those surfaces. Here is a good, so at Seed Savers Exchange, we can test the dryness of our seeds through a, a seed moisture testing machine, but I realize that most gardeners aren't going to go buy one of those really expensive, $1,200 machines to test. So there are really good ways to make sure the seeds are dry before putting them into storage. There's the bend test for larger flat seeds. So like squash seeds, if you take them and you bend them and they snap immediately, that's good. You want it to be able to snap. If it's flexible or bends at all, it needs to stay on the screens and dry for longer before putting them in storage. If you put a seed in storage when it's not at the moisture the internal moisture level that you want, the seeds start to warm up and create mold, and just like they could germinate. It just creates kind of bad issues. For anything like beans or corn or peas, you could do the hammer test. So placing the seed on a table and taking a hammer and smashing the seed, and if it flattens like a pancake, then it is not dry enough, and if it shatters, then it is good to go. Then there's the rub test for smaller seeds like tomatoes and lettuce. Um, you would take two pieces of paper just from your printer or from a notebook, and you will rub the seeds between that. And if it leaves a wet spot, it's too wet. And if it is not wet at all on there, the seeds are ready, and you can put them into into storage. All right, so storage of these seeds, they have to be dry and clean. And the ideal conditions for storing seeds are 35 degrees Fahrenheit and under 40% humidity. Seeds need to be at 3 to 8%. That's what we do before storage. But again, if they pass all those physical tests that you can do to the seeds, then you should be good to go. And then you should have a cool, dry, and dark spot to maintain these qualities. You could use envelopes, bags, glass jars, or plastic containers. Airtight containers are the best for longer term storage. All right, so this is my last little section about how to get more involved in seeds. So I realize this is so much information and you might be feeling a little bit overwhelmed, but if you can learn how to grow a tomato well, or if you can learn how to grow a pepper well, you can absolutely learn how to save seeds. And it is just something that it connects you to the earth and your crops and your garden and your community so much. And it is really just so, going to seed swaps and being able to swap your own seeds that you've been stewarding in your garden is really an incredible feeling. So this picture here is actually Diane and Kent Wheely and their family. Diane and Kent started Seed Savers Exchange in 1975. And so here's them and their kids. Kent passed away several years ago. Diane still has a garden at Seed Savers Exchange, and their son Aaron, their oldest son Aaron, actually runs his own seed company. So it's really sweet to see kind of the history of even who began Seed Savers Exchange. All right, so stewarding your own garden seeds, like I said, the tomatoes and beans and peas are probably your best bet to get started on these things. If you have one pea variety that you really, really love and it's the only pea variety you grow, try saving seeds from it. Start with one little thing, and once you feel comfortable, move to the next thing. Sharing seeds and stories like seed swaps, like I mentioned, with your neighbors, friends, and family. And then there's also a lot of seed communities that you can join. So there's the Community Seed Network. The Organic Seed Alliance is another nonprofit seed organization that helps more with policy work, farmer and seed relationships. They don't have a seed bank themselves, but we do a lot of work together to make sure that our seeds stay stewarded correctly. There's the Jewish Seed Project, the Experimental Seed Network, Indigenous Seed Keepers Network, and also Seed Savers Exchange has something called The Exchange, and you can find it on our website. And it's basically a gardener to gardener seed swap online. And really, you only need to pay for shipping, and you could get sweet seeds that someone's been stewarding in their garden from North Carolina or Iowa, or and we also have a lot of seeds from our collection in the exchange. So that's just another part of our website. You can purchase seeds from our catalog to support our mission, or you can go onto our exchange and find cool varieties that someone's stewarding other places in the country and try those in your garden. And we like to, keeping seeds available and connecting people is our mission. And we can't do it without all of you and without all of the seed savers and all of the support that we get. Um, and right now, actually, we have 13% discount on our website for our catalog sales, and it's going until Wednesday, the 25th of February. So if you haven't gotten your seeds yet for your garden, head over to seedsavers.org and shop our catalog. A lot of the varieties in our catalog have come out of our seed bank. We've stewarded enough seeds that we're now starting to share them around the country. All right, that is all I have prepared for tonight, and I believe we're right almost at time. But is there any questions or anything from you all?
Oh, yes, there are. So, let me just kind of start somewhere.
Sure.
What is the best way to save vegetable seeds to the next year? So, if you have too many seeds to plant in one year, like your next year, how about saving them to the year after that?
Like longer term storage is that the question?
Yeah,
Um,
or it seems to me maybe 2, 3 years.
yeah. So most seeds are going to be completely fine and viable for up to 5 or 10 years. And so that's why I said the thing about maybe steward one variety one year and then the next year go to a different variety. And soon you'll have your own little seed bank. So what you can do is cool, dark, dry place. So you could store them in a refrigerator, in a bag that's not, in a bag that you can't, like a paper bag, something that's dark. If you want to store them longer term, you can store them in the freezer. Just make sure they have a little bit more protection. And yeah, refrigerator, freezer, any of that is good. If you're storing at 30, 34 degrees, or 34 to 36 degrees, that should get you years and years and years out of your seed. As long as that's why we talk so much about processing and drying, because a lot of your seed longevity comes from the processing and drying part. So as long as you do that well, you should have seeds that stay viable for years in storage.
And another similar question. How about tiny seeds like snapdragons or lettuce? They're so tiny. Are there any special tips for those tiny seeds?
Yeah. Okay. So the smaller seeds are really hard, especially if you're doing it on our scale, but a little bit easier for gardeners. A lot of the times for seeds that are like poppy seeds, for example, are really tiny. And what we do is we harvest the dry flower and we kind of just make a little hole in it and dump the seeds out. So if you're talking
Mm.
about cleaning, you don't have to smash them up if you don't need to. If you can keep the chaff separate from the seed, if it's a petunia and you can just dump it into a little bag or onto a, plate to dry, that's also okay. Some of the methods that I said is if you're going to have, hundreds of flowers you're saving them from. But yeah, and then those small seeds, and it's okay to store things with a little bit of chaff in it, as long as the chaff is just as dry as the seeds. Hmm.
And another thing about saving and exchanging seeds.
Hmm.
So when you're exchanging native plant seeds, how local do you have to be? Like how how much, like, should I exchange seeds with someone? We're out here in Oregon. Should I exchange seeds from someone in Iowa? Or for native plants, should I only exchange in my local area?
I think it just depends. So, for example, I mean, a lot of a lot of the plants that exist right now are invasive or not native plants, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're bad. And if you're stewarding a variety that maybe I would love to steward in my garden here in Iowa, I think it's okay as long as there are, I think that what you would need to do is kind of first of all do your research to make sure that um, it would be growing in my growing zone. It would be okay growing in my growing zone, and then also make sure that when you've stewarded these seeds that they don't have visibly looks like they don't have disease on them. You're not transferring anything from your region to my region, and if I can steward it responsibly, then I think that's totally fine. Seeds right now are being exchanged between countries and continents. So, yeah, I think if you're, I think it just depends on what you're trying to do.
Just have some thought ahead of time.
Yeah.
We did have a question about storing seeds. What about pests in seeds? I saved some peas and a few months later found some beetles had emerged. Is there a way to stop developing insects from damaging the seeds? Should we be freezing them? What can we do?
Oh, okay. So are the insects getting in there after storage?
This was a question that came in.
Okay. I would say if the in always an airtight container, that's what I go with, kind of no matter what. I think that envelopes are okay, but there's more moisture transfer between like through the envelope than if you had like a glass mason jar. The only thing then you would need to be worried about then is light. You want to keep it as dark as possible, so you could put a tight mason jar of seeds into a paper bag, and then that paper bag can go into the freezer or refrigerator. If you don't feel like you want to, like if you want to store them in your basement because your basement has kind of like root cellar conditions, that's okay too. Just make sure, yeah, I always say airtight is good. And plastic bags that zip, like anything like that. Envelopes are hard though.
How about some beetles and weevils get in before they get into storage? You may not see them.
When they're drying on the plant and they could be crawling in. I think it would just be identifying if there's any holes or damage in your seeds, because you don't want to save any seeds ever that are damaged. And so I don't know if you have to go as serious as like visually looking at every single seed. Um, but I think there might be some signs of damage to the seed that you can just see kind of in pretty quick passing. That
Do you when you do your tests for how heavy the seed is, are insect damaged ones, are they going to be some of the lighter ones?
Yes.
Yeah.
Usually there'll be any type of damage. So usually insects will get in there to eat out the inside of the seed, and that will make it lighter. I don't know what happens if there's an insect inside of the seed. I don't know if I've ever experienced that. So I'm not sure what to say about that. Um, but I think you would be able to visibly see that the surface of the seed is damaged.
Okay. People were paying quite a good attention to your smashing. Your smashing. Are you concerned at all with disease? On your boots and dirt and things like that as you're doing that?
No, not so much. So, um, okay. What we do for tomatoes is we have special tomato stomping boots. Um, and then also what we do for beans is we don't necessarily step onto the beans. We put a tarp under them and over them. So you kind of fold the tarp over it. So when you're smashing, it's the tarp smashing the tarp and not your shoes. I do know that, like, again, for like phytosanitary reasons, it's really like it's not good to wear your farm shoes to another farm or your garden shoes into another garden. But the risks associated like in a garden setting are a lot lower than in a farm setting. Um, and so I'm not super worried about that unless, I mean, also if your shoes are wet or muddy, like definitely don't use that. You want your seeds to stay dry. But yeah, we do usually fold the tarp over so that there's not direct contact from the shoe onto the bean. And then also we have everyone has their own special pair of tomato stomping boots that we keep. And we spray. We have to like
Mhm.
totally um, clean off the boots between varieties because we don't want any seeds to be stuck and then mix up the
Mm.
varieties. So,
Mhm. Yeah, there's problems that probably the homeowner doesn't have.
right, right, right. Mhm.
And one last thing about seed savers.
Sure.
Are there interns, volunteers? Is everybody paid? So how what's going
Yeah.
on over there?
Yeah. Oh, good question. So we have 50 employees at Seed Savers Exchange. We have, I would say, probably 20 people work in the seed house. So they're the ones managing the catalog and the contract growers. And then we have a marketing team that does the marketing and communication. So if you sign up for our newsletter or you're on Instagram or Facebook and you see our posts, that's that team. We have a development, a membership and development team. So you can become a member of Seed Savers Exchange and get some benefits and support us through that. Um, and also, they are the fundraising team. So they do a lot of fundraising. Then we have a preservation team, which manages the seed bank. So, and they manage the exchange. So they do making sure the seeds, they decide what seeds are being grown out. They do the making sure that they do the germination testing, they do the storage, the long-term storage of the seeds. And then there's my team, the farm team, and we do the actual regeneration farm work of these seeds every day. And it's really cool because my farm team gets to be employed year round because in the winter they pop over into the seed house and they pack all of your orders and ship them out. So the folks packing your seed orders are the ones that are on my team growing the seeds out every year. So it's a really cool way to keep people employed and supported. Uh, yeah, our farm is completely certified organic. We have really good growing practices. We really care about our the natural world around us, especially in a state that, has the highest nitrates in our water and the highest cancer rates right now. And, there's boil your water notices that are happening. And it just is so hard to be here. But we feel like we're a little bit of a like an oasis in the state where we can kind of, steward and educate and, and be here. Because if we left to go somewhere, better or healthier, then our world would just continue to, or Iowa would just continue to decline in health and ecology and biology, and that's not what we want.
Well, thank you for being a little oasis out there, and thank you for bring, your time and guidance on
Absolutely.
quite a topic.